Some controversies don't begin with a headline. They begin with a sentence that sounds reasonable until people decide it applies somewhere it was never meant to. That's where Selena Gomez unexpectedly enters the Moana 2026 conversation. Not through a direct critique of the film and not through a targeted statement, but through a set of ideas she has consistently returned to over the years. Ideas about representation, creative pressure, and the quiet expectations placed on modern storytelling. When those ideas collided with Disney's live-action revival, many listeners felt something shift. Not outrage, not accusation, but discomfort. What made it controversial wasn't volume, it was relevance. Gomez has often spoken about the weight that comes with remaking stories in an era where visibility and responsibility are inseparable. In one widely circulated remark, she questioned whether revisiting beloved narratives always serves culture, or whether it sometimes serves comfort. That line, vague on its own, took on new meaning as audiences debated Moana 2026. Suddenly, people weren't asking what she meant, they were asking who it applied to. And that's where the tension lives. The reaction wasn't driven by hostility toward Moana as a story. If anything, the underlying concern was respect. Respect for origins, respect for timing, respect for the emotional memory audiences still hold. The controversial edge came from the implication, intentional or not, that some remakes may prioritize reassurance over reflection. To many fans, that's felt unfair. Moana 2026 has been framed as careful, culturally aware, and deeply intentional. So, when Gomez's broader comments were echoed in online discussions, it felt like a quiet challenge to that narrative. Not a rejection, but a question. Is care enough? What unsettled people most was how calmly the idea landed. There was no attack on the cast, no dismissal of effort, just the suggestion that modern films sometimes inherit responsibility without inheriting risk, that they protect meaning rather than test it. In the context of Moana 2026, that observation became controversial precisely because it touched a nerve. The film is widely seen as respectful, controlled, and emotionally balanced. For supporters, that balance is its strength. For critics, it raises a different concern, that restraint may limit evolution. The discussion intensified when Gomez's past remarks about creative pressure resurfaced. She once spoke about how artists are increasingly asked to get it right rather than get it honest. Applied broadly, that sentiment sparked debate around whether Moana 2026 feels more obligated than inspired, whether it moves forward because it must or because it has something new to say. That interpretation wasn't universal, but it was persistent. What makes this moment fascinating is that Gomez herself has long been associated with sensitivity toward representation and mental health within the industry. Her words carry weight not because they are sharp, but because they are careful. And care, when it questions another form of care, can feel threatening. Some fans pushed back hard, arguing that the film's ambition lies precisely in its restraint, that honoring cultural foundations without radical deviation is the point. Others, however, found themselves lingering on the unease Gomez's philosophy introduced, the idea that safety can quietly become a creative boundary. The controversy never exploded, it simmered. There were no statements to retract, no clarifications to issue, just a growing sense that Moana 2026 exists at the center of a larger conversation about modern filmmaking, one where intention, legacy, and innovation are constantly negotiating space. And that's why this reaction matters, even without a direct quote tied to the film. Because Selena Gomez represents a generation of artists who speak less about spectacle and more about consequence. When her viewpoints are applied, fairly or not, to a project like Moana 2026, they challenge audiences to look beyond surface success and ask deeper questions about purpose. Is the film expanding the emotional language of the story or preserving it? Is it inviting uncertainty or carefully managing expectation? And in an industry increasingly shaped by caution, is boldness still allowed to be imperfect? The controversy isn't about opposition, it's about tension between protection and progression, between honoring what worked and risking what might. Whether or not Gomez ever intended her words to touch Moana 2026, the reaction they sparked reveals something important. The film isn't just being watched, it's being measured, not against failure, but against possibility. And perhaps that's the most uncomfortable takeaway of all. When a story is loved this deeply, people don't just want it to return, they want it to grow. The question left hanging isn't whether Moana 2026 will succeed, but whether in playing it carefully, it's leaving part of that growth unexplored.